Operation Martyr, Soleimani, 2020. The night of January 3, 2020, was not just another night in the Middle East. The skies over Baghdad witnessed an event that would send shockwaves across the globe. A U.S. drone strike near Baghdad International Airport killed one of Iran's most powerful and revered military figures, General Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. His assassination was not just the death of a military leader, it was a direct attack on a symbol of Iranian power and influence in the region. The aftermath? Operation Martyr Soleimani, a meticulously planned Iranian response that would shake the foundations of U.S. military presence in the Middle East. Barely 5 days after Soleimani's death, Iran launched a barrage of ballistic missiles targeting 2 U.S. military bases in Iraq, Ain al-Assad Air Base, and another facility in Erbil. This was not a random act of aggression. It was a calculated, precision-driven strike that marked the first direct Iranian attack on U.S. forces in decades. The world watched as over a dozen missiles rained down on the bases, triggering panic and chaos. U.S. troops, caught off guard, scrambled for safety, hunkering down in bunkers as the ground shook with the force of the blasts. But this was just the beginning. Iran's choice of weaponry was significant. The Fateh 313 and Qiam-1 missiles, both part of Iran's advanced arsenal, were used in the operation. These missiles were not just aimed to inflict damage. They were a message, loud and clear, that Iran had the capability to strike U.S. assets with precision and impunity. While no U.S. soldiers were killed in the attack, over 100 American personnel suffered traumatic brain injuries due to the concussive force of the explosions. The psychological impact was undeniable. The myth of U.S. military invincibility in the region was shattered, and Iran had shown that it could retaliate with deadly force if provoked. But what made Operation Martyr Soleimani even more remarkable was the way Iran played the narrative. The IRGC claimed that the missile strikes were just the beginning, threatening an even harsher response if the United States dared to retaliate. Iranian leaders, from Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei to President Hassan Rouhani, made it clear that Soleimani's death would not go unavenged. The missile attack was choreographed not just as an act of military retaliation, but as a spectacle of defiance. It was broadcast live on Iranian state television, fueling nationalist fervor and galvanizing public opinion against the United States. The timing of the strikes was also symbolic. They came precisely at 1:20 a.m., the exact moment when Soleimani was killed by the U.S. drone strike. This deliberate act of symbolism was Iran's way of demonstrating control over the narrative, ensuring that Soleimani's legacy was immortalized through a powerful act of revenge. The Iranian government referred to the operation as a slap in the face to America, but to the world, it was a stark reminder of how fragile peace in the region was. What followed the strikes was a period of heightened tension that brought the United States and Iran dangerously close to full-scale war. U.S. forces across the region were put on high alert, while Iran's proxies in Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen prepared for possible escalation. Washington grappled with its next move. Would it retaliate, further spiraling the region into chaos, or would it take a step back and de-escalate the situation? The world held its breath. Interestingly, Iran's response was designed to send a message without crossing the line into open warfare. The missile strikes were precise enough to avoid massive casualties, but forceful enough to demonstrate Iran's capabilities. Behind the scenes, Iranian officials reportedly informed Iraqi leaders of the impending strike, giving U.S. forces enough time to take cover. This calculated move ensured that Iran could claim a symbolic victory without provoking an all-out war. Yet, the ramifications of Operation Martyr Soleimani went far beyond the immediate military exchange. The strike reinforced Iran's influence over Iraq, signaling to Washington that its military footprint in the region was vulnerable. It also emboldened Iran's proxy groups, who interpreted the operation as a green light to escalate their activities. From Lebanon to Yemen, Iranian-backed militias saw Soleimani's death as a rallying cry for greater resistance. Domestically, the operation boosted Iran's hardliners, who had long advocated for a more aggressive stance against the United States. It unified a fractured Iranian public, at least temporarily, as millions mourned Soleimani's death and rallied around the government's call for vengeance. Even Iranians who had previously protested against their own government now found themselves united in grief and anger against a common enemy. But the most chilling aspect of Operation Martyr Soleimani was the unspoken warning it carried. Iran had demonstrated that its missile capabilities were not just a threat, but a reality. It had shown that it could strike U.S. forces directly without fear of immediate retaliation. And it had sent a clear message that any future provocations would be met with even greater force. In the end, Operation Martyr Soleimani was not just a military operation. It was a statement that Iran would not back down, that its influence in the region was far from diminished, and that the death of Qasem Soleimani would not mark the end of Iran's ambitions, but rather the beginning of a new and more dangerous chapter in its confrontation with the United States. As the dust settled over Ain al-Assad and Erbil, the world realized that the balance of power in the Middle East had shifted, and not in favor of stability.